sadly, what entrepreneurs, the most important thing that they should be doing is working on their business, not in their business. Sometimes people make their goals feel so unattainable, but if you say you're going to do it and you've worked your way back, the only person that can stop you is you. You know, when I first start working with all of my clients, I have them do this.
Laura Lorenz is the founder of Top Floor Mentoring, a business coaching and mentorship firm. She worked in the software industry and later co-founded a successful marketing agency. She has over 35 years of experience working with entrepreneurs and small businesses, helping them achieve clarity, structure, and growth.
So I'm kind of curious how you coach around both young professionals and entrepreneurs, because a lot of them face lack of confidence.
Most of us don't look at the good stuff in our business and in our lives. We look at the things that are negative, that are dragging us down. When they're down, we start talking about, let's look at the things that you have actually accomplished.
How you approach working with entrepreneurs and their businesses from a coaching perspective.
I meet you where you're at today, and we work totally uniquely, however you need, but where I can see your goals are.
What advice would you give to somebody who's overwhelmed by too many ideas?
That's a good question.
Welcome back to another episode of Built for This, Stories of a Maverick. My name is Jenna Bayuk, founder of Kinship Collective, and I'm super excited to jump into today's episode. We've got a seasoned strategist, mentor, and accountability champion, Laura Lorenz, the founder of Top Floor Mentoring, who spent over 35 years uplifting entrepreneurs and small businesses through clarity, structure, and heart, something that I'm very deeply aligned with myself. She's not just about marketing and systems, but also about helping people rediscover their confidence and build a business from the top down. So we're going to jump in today and we'll explore Laura's journey from hands-on marketing, sales coaching, to build repeatable roadmaps for growth. We'll dive into the power of systems over talent and the friction between perfection and progress, how accountability can transform entrepreneurs from stuck to strategic. And then whether you're scaling or searching for clarity, this will be a great episode to get some takeaways and some deeper insights. So let's get into it. Welcome, Laura.
Hello.
Awesome. Well, I would love to kind of just start off by learning a little bit more about kind of, your background and sort of how you got into the coaching world.
Sure. I worked for a software company, kind of helping teach people how to sell and market accounting software of all things. And so I was guiding businesses from the beginning of my career, but that was a corporation I was working for. I left, took a little break, raised some children, came back. I was blessed that I could do that. Came back, and a gentleman that I worked with at the software company called me and said, "Hey, I'm starting a marketing consultancy. You're the only one I want to help me. Come on board and let's do this." So we did, and it was great. We grew from the two of us to 10 employees, and we became more of a marketing agency than a consultancy. So, we did everything from soup to nuts for marketing, the traditional marketing, internet marketing, all of that. And that was a blast. And that taught me so much about how to deal with employees, how to just basically run a business, because I had never done that before. And then I left there, not because it was a bad experience, I loved it, but because I wanted to break out on my own and do something a little bit different than we were doing. I did that, and that kind of blossomed into where I am today.
Yeah. And I'm curious, kind of, you get to take a break and you jump into an entrepreneurial environment and then you're kind of getting ready. Did you grow up with parents who were kind of highly entrepreneurial, that spirit? Because it does take an element of kind of risk and trusting in what you did. So I'm curious if that was kind of always around you, or you're kind of, we'll call it the black sheep that decides to do something totally different than anybody else.
No, it's funny when you ask me that. I hadn't even put two and two together until just now. My dad, my grandfather had a business that was handed down from his dad, and that got handed down to my dad. So, of course, he was an entrepreneur. And my mother had a dance school of 350 kids. So she was an entrepreneur too. But, I never looked at the fact that I came from an entrepreneurial family until just now. So yes, I had a family. I had a dad that was so awesome. He said, "You can be anything you want to be. Go out there and do it."
So did you know that when you left the marketing agency that you wanted to get into coaching? Or I'm just kind of curious, what sort of do you start to see or kind of realize as your sort of strengths of I want to take kind of what I'm doing here and maybe shift this in a different way and kind of focus more on this particular way of going about strategy?
It's interesting that you ask that because I was really, when I left, I just wanted to do specifically marketing strategy. But when I think about it, and I thought a long time about this, marketing is everything about your business, right? I love Peter Drucker said there's two things in business, innovation and marketing, right? So, and I've always worked with the business coach because I feel like it's so important to have someone that looks from the outside to you to like get rid of your blind spots and help you work through that kind of thing. So my coach, this was pre-COVID, like, and when COVID hit, my coach said to me, why don't you come on board with me and just do business coaching? I still have business. And I was
Yeah.
like, yay. So that's kind of how it worked.
Yeah.
Right. It worked out beautiful because it then allowed me to encompass, I have an accounting background, so I understand all that part of business and my people knowledge, my psychology knowledge, and then, just pure business information, put it all together. And here we are today.
And did you kind of have that particular type of entrepreneur or kind of industry in mind right away when you kind of started, where you just kind of went in with the, I'm going to kind of meet with everybody and sort of see who I kind of click and connect with? And then kind of did your sort of approach get kind of built along the way, or did you come in really strong already knowing kind of how you were going to build these roadmaps?
Because I had been in business for 30 years and watched everything happen, I kind of had it figured out already. But you still, every day, every client that you work with, it's new and it's different because it's all different situations. You know, I originally started Top Floor Mentoring to work specifically with young professionals because there's such a need out there today. Because colleges are great and they teach you all the esoteric stuff, but they don't teach you what business is really all about. And that's great. And I still do a lot of that, but I also work with entrepreneurs and small businesses right now.
Your idea of sort of the goal guardians. And I mean, I know you're a big kind of accountability partner, and I love that. Like anytime someone's like, well, first, let's just sort of who's accountable for what before we jump into here, before we start getting in a match of like, you should be doing this. Cause like, do you really know what you're supposed to be doing? Is what you're doing what you're supposed to be doing? So I'm just kind of curious of sort of kind of, how you came about sort of, that side of things and really kind of nurturing accountability within, your style and the clients you work with.
It comes from me thinking I need the accountability. Like I need to have somebody to hold me accountable. And the goal getters group that I do, it's so nice to have, and this is all just things that I have needed in my life that I can see there's a need for out there. But to be able to have a group of people that you can trust and you can really talk about your problems that you're having in business is such an amazing thing. And that's kind of what this group does. I don't ever accept more than 10 people in one group so that we can all really have a chance every time we get together to say, what are you challenged with today, and be able to help each other get that all going. And then, we partner up and I have a LinkedIn page where we're talking to each other and making sure that we're holding all of us accountable for what we said we were going to do. So,
And I'm curious, from that perspective, how do you encourage, vulnerability? Because sometimes some people, that's natural for them to kind of get very transparent about what's really going on versus kind of in a group, regardless, kind of small or larger. Some people naturally are a little more hesitant to kind of like scream from the rooftop, like, this is burning on fire right now, or I'm really bad at this.
it's funny because the group is always comprised of a little bit of all of those type of people.
Yeah.
And what happens is, as the more gregarious, outgoing people that, already feel like they can be open, and most people do feel like that because that's how I am when I talk to them about anything I'm doing, is we're super vulnerable and super transparent about stuff. But when someone gets talking, the quiet person over in the other side's going, man, I had that problem too. Let me ask you. So it just kind of cultivates in itself, or germinates.
Is there anything in terms of those groups that, coming together and doing it for a while, that still surprise you, that people are like nervous or kind of surprised that other people are having the same problem, where it's like, oh, it's not only me?
I would be surprised if something came out that it was only them, right? Because, after all these years, there's consistently the same problems that everybody has, right? Over and over and over again. And the thing that's important in those groups is to be able to understand that we all feel that same way, right? Because I just got off the phone with a young professional and we were talking, and he said, sometimes I feel like I'm in a room and I don't know what these guys know. And I'm like, here's the deal. You know what you know. They don't know what you know, right? So you can help them and they can help you. And it's what we're all here to do, is help each other to be successful and thrive.
I mean, across the board, confidence is such like an important piece, and I relate to who you were talking about before, because I remember early on in my career going into a room where I was doing a ton of talent acquisition and pulling in all these amazing executives, and then you kind of starry-eyed by how smart they are. You've seen them now kind of do their thing in a room and present, or hold an entrepreneur to task is kind of like, scary, and you're like, okay, now I have to figure out how to work with them, or like, you get it. Try not to use the word imposter syndrome, because I don't think anybody's trying to be an imposter, but
No. Oh, no, 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 no.
that less than in a way until you realize sort of, if everybody lets go of their ego and you approach somebody with, good intentions and you ask questions, majority of people are willing to help and teach you and bring you in. And it's not about them being better than you than any stretch or form. So I'm kind of curious, how you coach around both, young professionals and entrepreneurs, because a lot of them face lack of confidence in certain areas, depending on where they're at. Kind of how do you connect that with them to help them build that, that confidence, but also release some perfectionism as well?
Yeah, I have some of that issue with me with perfectionism. So one of the things that I at least pride myself on, I was never a cheerleader in high school, but I am.
I was.
Well, but I say that I'm my client's best cheerleader, because
Yeah.
when they're down, we start talking about, let's look at the things that you have actually accomplished, because most of us don't look at the good stuff in our business and in our lives.
Yeah.
We look at the things that are negative, that are dragging us down. So if you can take someone from, I feel like this, to, oh yeah, you're right, and you can even go back to when there were kids and they did something amazing. It's just, you have to get your mindset in the right place, and talking about those things, the accomplishments that you've had. You are stable and you are solid and you have me behind you to help you get to be where you want to be.
And I'm curious a little bit in terms of kind of your structure and approach. I would say even now coaching has become so much more popular than it used to be. And then we've got now kind of a worldwide call, like a variety of coaches. Some are specialists, some are taking a very, untraditional route in terms of what it means to be a coach and hit a bunch of different facets. So I'm curious kind of, your style and what, how you approach kind of working with, entrepreneurs and their businesses from a coaching perspective.
It's funny because I don't call myself a coach. I'm a mentor, because coaches, at least I have been told, are supposed to ask questions and, kind of like psychiatrists, let you come to your own solutions. And after all these years, I can't shut my mouth, to be really honest with you. So I have to say, have you thought of, or work together? So I'm a combination of a consultant and a coach. I think is different, because some people come out with canned programs. That's not me. I meet you where you're at today, and we work totally uniquely, however you need, where I can see your holes are. And you're right, man, there are so many people that call themselves coaches. I had to laugh the other day. I was reading this article by a life coach who was 23 years old, and I'm thinking, how can you be a life coach? You haven't even lived a quarter of your life yet.
Yes, it is an interesting era of time for sure, of really kind of understanding what that is. And I always think kind of like anything, you always gotta, you find what works for you. And sometimes you outgrow certain mentors and coaches, and then you
Yep.
kind of find your next group of people. And in terms of kind of, I would say your happiest moments as a mentor, where somebody started with you and where they got to, I'd love to kind of understand sort of some of those wins.
I was working with a solopreneur who is super talented graphic artist, but he was just all over the place. And he had, his business wasn't going anywhere because he was trying to be this and he was trying to be that. So we sat down and said, it took 6 months to really figure out, because he was trying to do, like different, how you see that shiny object and you go, oh, I'm going to try to be this, or I'll be this. I had him really sit down, and over 6 months, we figured out what he really wanted to be, who he wanted to be for his clients. And then from there, it was interesting. I was just talking to him the other day about statistics because I can see the growth, but I'm silly and I don't ask these statistical things that I should, right? I'd fail at things too. Your coach isn't perfect, right? No coach is perfect. But he said since that 6 months, if he looks at last July to this July, every month he has doubled what that was because he finally got some systems and processes, was really clear on who he was and how he should interact with his clients.
There's a lot of especially entrepreneurial brains, I call it like the sparkly effect, where everything that's like shimmering around them, they're like, ooh, that's interesting, I want to go that way, ooh, I want to go that way. And it's like, okay, let's just get the squirrel tactics into the cog over here. Let's focus you on one direction. Let's figure out if that's viable first, and then we can jump to 2 through 1,000.
Yeah, it's like, let's look at what the original vision was, and does that actually fit into that?
Through kind of the clients you work with, has it been, sometimes it happens, by accident, or sometimes it happens very intentionally, in terms of any industries or kind of specific sizes of businesses where you find you've been the most effective and or kind of just ended up with sort of a client base that's sort of similar in some kind of way?
Well, because I had the marketing agency and I built an agency,
Yeah.
other marketers makes sense because I've really been there, done that. So that's that. I've always been within the service industries because that's kind of how I grew up, giving services and learning how to do that. So, lawyers and law firms and accounting firms and things like that. I work quite well with. I love individual solopreneurs. The thing is, and I hate doing this because having had a marketing agency, you really should be able to niche down. But everybody needs a coach. I mean, even Elon Musk has probably got 25 coaches, I mean, we need them. And so most things in business are not that different. Like, I love it when someone will say, well, have you worked in my industry before? And I'll say, no, but you know what? That's good because I'll have a completely fresh approach
Yeah.
than, somebody that's been there forever. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I would say marketing firms are probably the biggest that I have worked with just because of my knowledge.
Yeah. And then from a scaling perspective, I'm, curious in terms of kind of how you get to kind of shift, from the tactical to the strategic, because depending on where you at, it's really hard to kind of see above, having to get 100 things done, and sort of how do you kind of incorporate some mindset shifts to kind of elevate that person from a thought perspective, and then kind of get them more thinking about profitability if it's not top of mind, or how they're kind of getting in their own way in that way.
Well, when they first come to me, I deal with that, whatever specific problem they have right then. But then we get talking about how having the right foundation in your business, you have to have that, because if you don't understand your strategies of why you're doing what you're doing, how you describe it to people, all of that, work and work and work, but you're never going to be profitable because you don't know who to attract.
Yeah.
Right. And how you can attract them. So I do a lot of education around that because everybody wants to go tactical. What's the one thing that's going to work? And it's like, foundation. This is the one thing that's going to work. So
I remember one of the lawyers we worked with, like way back when, he was like, "What I'm trying to get him to understand, like a house, you got to pour the foundation first, because otherwise everything's going to fall, inwards, outwards, or across to each other." And I'm like, that visual always stuck in my mind as I started to kind of move forward, or saw what happened when that wasn't super solid, and all the iterations that kind of come after that.
the people who've had that all fall in are the ones that call me because they're looking to, make it better.
Sometimes you have to learn the hard way. You have to just do it yourself to know what not to do versus what you need to do next. And then do you have kind of a system or systematic approach in terms of when you look at building like a systematic processes maybe or may or may not be there, that you kind of educate or sort of follow with the clients that you work on, to kind of map that out in a way that makes sense to them? Or if I don't really have any systems, like it's this one folder with one document that has a bunch of gibberish in it.
Well, I always start with what's your vision for the company? Because if you don't have a real vision set in place, you can't build the foundation because, again, you're all over the place. But once we have the vision and we understand where we want to go, then I work my way backwards with them to say what needs to be done this month. Who do I need to meet? You know, this year I need to meet these people. This month I'm going to meet these people. This week I need to do this. So it's very, very well thought out plan because so many of us, when we set goals to achieve, we set the goal and we don't really think about what am I going to give up, because obviously you haven't hit your goals. So you need to give something up to get there. Who do I need to help me? And just all the small steps, because you can't eat, the line about the elephant. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right?
Yeah. And how are you finding, especially just because AI is such a big thing coming in now to disrupt, and even like Gail coming from a marketing background, obviously a lot of agencies are looking at how, they're going to be able to move a lot quicker, systematically organize things in a much different way because the speed to action is just dramatically kind of increased. And as well in other industries, there's going to be AI in some way, shape, or form tool that's
Oh
going to
yeah, in every industry.
business.
Mhm.
I'm curious kind of how you're thinking about it and how you're chatting with your clients sort of about that shift.
Depending on the business, as you say, we're talking about marketing firms, that it's crucial for them to move over and really, but to understand that it's not going to take the place of their creativity and their brilliance, right? So I love using it for ideas or titles because then you can go, okay, I could write this, and this. But I highly warn them to not just like let Claude write something for them and put it out, right? It's use it as idea, change it, edit it, make it be you, and then use it. But it's so funny because we're all talking about is even my own industry with coaching. Can we be replaced by AI? I don't think so because the emotion and the heart and the person. I don't think AI will ever take over from people because of that, because we all require that intimacy with people. So,
Yeah, I'm curious how to unfold. I agree there will be some point of, I think it'll get a lot worse before it gets a lot better because it's kind of like the wild, wild west and nobody really knows and there isn't those guardrails set. But I think at some point, and I think it'll be in certain sections, it'll kind of have a domino effect of where people like, okay, kind of like before, I always say before your phone had like pay for parking on your phone and like Google Maps that it could just tell you. There'll be certain things we're like, okay, this is great. Like these tools we want to keep, but we want to move away from, Siri being able to track everything I'm saying. And like only when I want to will I like hit said AI and like engage into the means that I would like to, not, take over from everything. But that human connection perspective for sure is, I think, where we've already gotten a lot away from, and people really are trying to figure out how to bring that sense of community back in whatever they're building, whether it's naturally probably going to be a smaller team in a lot of ways because of AI being able to do very mundane functions
sure.
very quickly. But
Yep.
from a team perspective, for sure.
To me, and again, this is totally dating me, but I was in business before there was even the internet, right? So when websites and all of that stuff came into play, it was like, that was the wild, wild west. And then social media was the wild, wild west. So this is just one more evolution in business. And the only thing I would say is if you do not begin to ride the wave of the evolution, you are going to be in trouble. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where people are like, oh, the internet, who's going to use that? Like,
Well,
well,
yeah,
everyone.
exactly. It was like, oh, come on, what do we need the internet for? And then we had email, and I was like, oh my God, look at this. We can communicate with people so much easier. So
Yeah.
again, it's funny because when you talk to different people, there are industries that have fully embraced AI, and there are industries that are sort of panicked about it. It's a wave, just like every other wave. It was like, hey, we went from being farmers to industrial, right? So it's life, and just keep learning and keep growing because, and I say this to people, if you stop learning, you're dead. I mean, you are seriously dead, because the amount of information that is out there, it changes so quickly that you've got to, keep up and keep trying to find the new things that are out there that you can hitch onto.
Yeah. And is there any kind of, I'll call it like tricks or approaches that you have in terms of working with entrepreneurs to kind of help them kind of break through, but think without getting that massive like overwhelm and panic, like whether it is a big tech shift or, when they get that foundation built, sometimes it is like, oh my goodness, there's so much work to do. And for some people, that is the driver and they can move really fast. They can bulldoze also while they're moving really fast. But how do you kind of, break through in that way to sort of prevent that, I'll call it reaction, before it's a problem?
Well, I keep bringing them back to what was the focus of your business and how will this improve your business. You've got to break things down into small steps. And when something comes in and you can't just be that shiny object or, glitter, it's squirrel, whatever you want to call it. You really have to do every day. I'm a big proponent of picking 3 things out of your millions of to-do lists, right? 3 things that are going to move your business forward, that are going to increase your revenue. Do those first, then look at the shiny objects around and see, like I said, does it fit within my perspective, or are there other things that I can be doing? And have somebody to talk to about it. Because honestly, I mean, I still have a coach. I need a coach. I get the glitter stuff going all the time. It's like, oh, I need to learn this tool. And I was like, really? Do I really? So yeah, I think it's just, you have to keep bringing yourself back to what is the purpose and what was the initial idea of the business. And if that's not serving you anymore, then let's figure out where you want to be and how that's going to work for you.
How would you manage? I always push on this. If you have the person who is fast is never fast enough, where it's like, okay, great. But like, you work with them and you're giving that time and like, it's just not fast enough. We have to go faster. We have to go faster. And I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs that are like that. And there's certain things for sure, pedal to the metal. If you have a couple high performers, generally they end up taking the brunt of that work and work 24/7 and go make, that drive happen. But from, I guess, kind of that mentor perspective, and you had that highly ambitious kind of that element of crazy that I think every entrepreneur does have, to have the big visions to change things. How do you kind of pull in those reins or help them get a bit more, I think, self-awareness about, what that, although great trait is, can also be not so positive in a lot of ways sometimes.
I almost came out with, you have to have this balance in your life, but there is never balance in your life. So I need to take that word out of my vocabulary. But people are that highly productive and want to work all the time. You have to ask them, what's that costing them in the other areas of their life? Because while I work with them business-wise, I also work with them personally. So we're working on, how's your, your family life, and how's your spiritual life, and how's all of this. Everybody does the wheel of life, right? But if you do it and your business part is way here and your personal life is here, then the wheel is so lopsided. It's a visual way for them to look at it and go, ooh, maybe I need to change a little. Or, they talk about their headaches and all of the, physical stuff that's going on with them because they're so busy all the time, right? So you know why that's occurring, right? How is that physically working for you? It's not. Well, okay, let's dial it back a little.
Yeah. One of my favorite questions I like to ask is like, is there any time in your calendar where you just get to think? There's nothing. Like, you could just sit, whether it's an hour or 2 hours, and just actually think, so you could make sure you're actually working on the highest like level problem. Or so you could just like take a breather and like give your brain a break, so you have those transition moments that like, oh, okay, now I know how to solve that. But if you're constantly back to back and you can't, there's no time for your nervous system to even just come down a little bit, it's definitely not a sustainable method for
No, agreed.
life.
Yeah. Well, and sadly, with entrepreneurs, the most important thing that they should be doing is working on their business, not in their business, right?
Yeah.
So taking that walk to just let your mind open. I mean, for me, I solve problems by walking because I love being outdoors and it just clicks for me. But, some people have to run, some people have to, meditate. you do have to, and time blocking is huge. I have my clients put in time for themselves every day. And then either they do a half day of, I'm not going to do anything but work on this specific thing for my business. It all depends on them and how they are, but it's got to be in your calendar because we all live by our calendars. If it's not, it doesn't get, we find something to fill that time.
I do the parallel. I do a time block, and then I also color code so I can
Yeah.
see really visually like what's making me money, what's am I learning, what's like self-care, what's social. And then the weeks where I'm like, oh, I'm exhausted, and I look at my calendar for the week, I'm like, oh,
Yeah, I know. I know. Mine is all color coordinated too. My husband walked by the other day and he's like, "What is that? That's crazy." Like,
yeah, somebody doesn't know. I've had that too where I'm inputting things. They're like, what's going on there? I'm like, oh, let me tell you. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
color coding is awesome because then you can look back. And that's something that whether you are an entrepreneur or you're an employee of somebody, looking at the end of the week, how did your week go? What were the good things? Right? What could you change to maybe make next week better? If you don't do that, you're constantly on a hamster wheel.
Yeah. Or I find too, especially with teams, if it is a tough week for whatever reason and things didn't work out, if they don't really have the chance to either like decompress or like look back, you carry it into the next week. And then it becomes that kind of toxicity of like, we're never going to make it. This idea is not, this is stupid. Nobody's listening. And then it starts to bubble up. And that's for sure when entrepreneurs jump in and then you have them jumping into the weeds. And usually nothing good happens when they kind of jump out to kind of get in there. But I think it's such a valuable tool for everybody. And I'm curious in terms of kind of, your vision as you look forward, kind of your thoughts about kind of your lofty goal to like empower 1,000+ like driven individuals with clarity. Like how does that break down? And since we're talking about big goal into like little pieces, how did that one, I'll call it like your BHAG, come about? And then how do you kind of go about achieving it?
It's one day at a time, talking to as many people as you can talk to. Sometimes people make their goals feel so unattainable. But if you say you're going to do it and you've worked your way best, the only person that can stop you is you.
Yeah.
And, when you get off track, that's also when you need those people behind you, your coaches, to say, hey, what's going on? What can we do to fix this? Is this really what you want to do? Because if it's not, then stop working on it because you're beating yourself up about it, kind of thing. So same as I do for my clients, you have a roadmap and you just keep plugging along. Seems when I say that, it seems so easy, but it's not. We all know it's not.
And I was like, do you have kind of, I'll call like a framework in particular, because a lot of people are great at the big lofty idea. And then they kind of want to walk out of the room and like, yeah, go figure out how to make it happen. And everyone's like staring at the wall. Like, some people deer in headlights, some people, are able to really like, okay, let's now start breaking down chunks. But is there a framework or kind of like guiding principles that you go about how to kind of take the impact of like the big statement to make it a bit more digestible?
I think, when you're working in a business where the owner is going, here, take my vision and make it happen, he's got to have some idea of how that's going to work within the teams. And then, you meet with your managers to say, here's my vision. How would you approach this? Because I think you need to be a servant leader. You need to be able to say, I'm going to empower you, manager, to get this done. I'm not going to tell you how to do it, but I'd like you to tell me how you're going to do it. Right. And then once the managers have that vision, then they've got to break it down. So it's just a lovely little pyramid.
And I'm curious because you mentioned servant leadership, and there's obviously lots of books on different styles of leadership, and there's definitely a lot of clients who worked out what they would say that's their style. Some I would disagree that it's their style, but nonetheless, any particular books from a leadership perspective that stand out that are your favorites?
I like John Maxwell's books on leadership a lot. God, there's so many. I'm trying to think of one that stood out because, you read so many of them that they all begin to sound the same. But yeah, I would say I would recommend John Maxwell's leadership because this is definitely servant leadership and a way to empower your employees. I mean, if you are that dictator micromanager, you're going to fail in today's day and age because that is not what your employees need or want.
And as you kind of, go about approaching your goal from like a tools perspective and with like, AI coming in, what are you sort of looking at either in terms of how you structure your service or tools you bring in for yourself to kind of expand or move faster?
Good question. You know, when you're a solopreneur, you kind of wing it a lot of the times. I'm just starting to get my act together. I love Claude, so I use Claude a lot. Now, I've spent a lot of time making sure Claude understands who I am and how I would do things. Because you can't just go in there and say, hey, write a blog about this, right? It's never going to sound like you. So I think AI tools are going to be important. Personally, we used to use Asana in the business that when I had my marketing agency to make sure we were all doing the right things. Me personally, right now, I live by my calendar and my CRM, right? But, it's so hard to say what are you going to use even a year from now because things are changing so rapidly. It's just got to be any kind of tool that brings you clarity and to what you are doing and helps you move forward. That you can be in tool overload too. And I find my clients, we all do it because it's like, we got to keep up with this. But then it's like, am I working or am I learning all day? I need to.
Gotta have an element blocked off for like, I'm gonna play with these things, like to see what's gonna make sense.
Well, yeah, because there's no one answer for people, like people will say, what's the best CRM for me to use? One that you will use. Right?
Well, and again, it's not one of those things where you're like, in theory, you generally just have to like try a couple or understand, and you don't know until you kind of get into it. You're like, oh, that's actually a feature I really, really need. And I didn't know I needed it until I started to like understand how it all works. Or, sometimes you make a move and you're like, oh, okay, 3 months down the line, this was not it. Let's pivot and let's start using this one because now we have a way better understanding of what we're trying to do with this.
Yep. But, the other thing is there are productivity specialists out there that will sit down and speak to you about your needs. I know one in particular who's amazing at drawing out the things that you never thought you would need until you go, oh, and then she'll ask you that, is that cool or is that a need, right? And so then she'll go out and she'll find the right tool for you based on how you're using things. So, if you are in overwhelm about tools, we can't do it alone.
Yeah.
It's just not possible. And there are people that know how to do the things that you're struggling with and taking too much time.
For sure.
So.
Yeah. I always think it's funny how people sort of forget that, like, it's not, you wouldn't go to somebody who was like, oh, yeah, I've fixed teeth before. Like, you're going to go to a dentist to, do the
Right.
thing that they went to school to do. So just like any type of thing where like there's somebody who's going to be a specialist at it, so bring them in to help you so you don't have to take 35 hours to figure out what the heck you want to do or just give up halfway because it's just too much. And you're like, I just don't have the time for this anymore.
There are people that are out there that are reasonably priced. I mean, I think the thing that solopreneurs and small business owners are afraid of is if I ask for help, it's going to cost me a fortune. Surprisingly, doesn't have to be.
No.
Find the right person that you click with that's the right price point and you'll get what you need.
Yeah. That's always a big thing. And I'm sure you've experienced or I've come in just because people, and I think sometimes entrepreneurs, because again, quick to make decisions, usually sometimes don't always look at the detail. And then they get taken advantage of and they're like, I just, paid all this money. I got zero for it. And you're like, oh, okay, well, why would you have approved this? Or there's, a mismatch in between where like, if you just take the time and make sure you have that values alignment, like you're going to have that cost up front and it's pretty relatively in most areas. You can find somebody that's going to work within the, the budget that you have and that's going to be a great fit. And I'm kind of curious, if you could pose a question to people listening or how you approach it, kind of what, core shifts, if there's a solopreneur or a young person out there, would you kind of ask them to think about or consider in terms of them in the midst of a growth curve or starting out and really unsure about what to do and kind of feeling that lack of confidence or not sure where to go, kind of maybe what would be a couple of questions you would ask so they could kind of start to think about that and then go towards coaching as a means to help them?
So my first question with people always is, what's your why? Because if you do not understand that why, when things get hard, there's nothing to fall back on to say, this is why I'm going through this horrible thing, because you do go through some pretty horrible stuff as a business owner. And if you can't picture that why, you're dead. I mean, it's just not going to work for you. So really understanding your why, and don't just go one level deep. I mean, with my clients, I'll say, and yeah, okay, and what's that going to achieve? And why is that important? So you need somebody to help you with that, because even myself, when I try to do it for me, I get like, I could go deeper, but I don't, I'm stuck and I can't figure out. You need someone to ask the right questions.
Push back of like the level to the fire to like, I don't think that's it, or like, keep going.
Yep. So knowing your why, big first most important thing. And then I think understanding, and we all, this is life. It's a roller coaster ride. When you go into business for yourself, there are going to be days where you are just hating life, and there are going to be days where you are so elated it's amazing. It is not when you go to work for someone and it's the same thing every day. It's a challenge. And I worry and talk to people that they're not really ready to go into business for themselves, but they think they are. And so, understanding the hits that you could take. Do you have enough money to do this? All of that. So really understanding, again, but kind of gets back to your why. And then get someone to help you. I mean, honestly, I know people who have 5 different coaches. You got your dietary coach, your exercise coach, your life coach, but when I look at those people, they're really pretty together, and they're wonderful people and humble, and just, whereas when you sit and you try to do everything alone, it's lonely.
I say nobody has it figured out. Everybody needs help, and everybody needs a team behind them to help them, whatever that looks like. Human entrepreneur, everybody's the same in that way. It's just different levels of needs for everybody to move forward in life. And I kind of want to round out sort of the kind of strategy and kind of beliefs into sort of rapid fire questions.
Here we go.
Kind of like takeaway pieces for people to sort of walk away with at the end. What's one practice that you use, or that maybe you work with clients to do, to kind of instantly shift your mindset out of self-doubt?
It's interesting. I'm going to use a Tony Robbins because it works for me. His whole stop what you're doing, stand up, get your posture going, think about where your focus is. It's sitting right here. I'm like, this is my badass state. It's focus, your physiology, right? Because if you move around, I have guys that will not do this, but I keep saying, like before a really big sales call, put on some music and jump around and get yourself out of where you are so that you can focus on what you have to do. And then keep telling yourself you are enough, you're good enough, right? If you can do all of those things together, it is a very quick shift. And I'm so thankful that Tony taught me that.
Yeah, I did one of his sessions, and I remember, and I grew up dancing. So I'm like, any excuse for me to dance party? Like, you have no problem convincing me that this is a good idea. But I had one of my friends come over, and she was like, came in and there was music blaring, and I was like dancing around. My dogs are following me around. She's like, what's going on? I'm like, oh my goodness, I just had an awful day, and there was like a restructuring happening and layoffs, and you're just like, had to be done, but you just feel the life has been kicked out of you. And I do a rapid shift into a totally different world and project. And she's like, you kind of look a little bit insane right now. And I was like, what? Don't knock until you tried it. Cause I'm like getting everything out of my body so I can focus and show up in a totally different way in 15 minutes.
Yep. I mean, that's the only way I know how to do it, because otherwise you're thinking about it all the time.
Okay, well then this is a question that connects it. What would be your go-to song that you put on?
Oh man, there's a bunch of them. What would be my one go-to song? There's some new music that I listen to that I don't even know who does it, kind of stuff. Anything that has good drum beat and it's uplifting would be what I would do.
Cool, like the kind of pop styles.
Yeah, and it's funny because that's not what I really listen to when I'm going to listen to music.
Yeah.
But it helps with that whole mind shift thing.
Okay, awesome. And then do you have like a morning or an evening routine that sort of keeps you grounded?
Yep. And this is, when I first start working with all of my clients, I have them do this. I give them a journal, right? So the first thing I do in the morning is I get up and I meditate, right? And let's think about the day, but not in the what do I have to do, but put my frame of mind in the right place, right? So get rid of the to-dos and just get positive. Do that meditation. Then I journal, but it's a thankful journal, right? So it's not, today was a really sucky day. 3 things that I'm thankful for. And people are like, what if I have a day where I'm not thankful for anything? I'm like, you could be thankful that you're breathing, that you have a roof over your head. You've got things to be thankful for. And that also changes your mindset. And then honestly, I like to dance. So I do some, like, this is so old, jazzercise, but it's not jazzercise anymore.
Zumba, I'm here for it.
There you go. I love Zumba. So I do that. And then I tell them at night, yeah, also before you go to bed, write down what you're thankful for, because that helps ease your mind to be able to go to sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always those little things that are tough to do and tough sometimes to start doing them consistently. But once you start to do, it's really amazing kind of how that perspective and the mindset shifts. This would be a good one. What advice would you give to somebody who's overwhelmed by too many ideas?
What's your why? Why are you doing what you're doing? Does that serve you? Will it gain revenue? Will it move the business forward? If not, throw it away.
Yeah, we'll say work with the coach, because they might even start spiraling and like, I have 25 whys of what I want to do.
So you need 1, not 25.
The overachiever in me is like, could you have more though? What would be kind of a business growth myth you want to kind of bust that I think, people come in thinking is true, or you just like, it's not?
That it's easy and fun to be an entrepreneur. And I'm not meaning that to be negative, because I am one, and I love many people who are. You just have to truly understand that this isn't just because you think you do something better than your boss that you can open up a business and it's going to be easy, because it's not.
There's a lot of resilience and grit required. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're a person that gets beaten down by the first push, no, either get a coach to help you pass that, or just don't do it at all.
Yeah, stay away for sure. All right, last question. In your own words, define what built for this means to you.
When I looked at your thing, the first thing that came to my mind is I am built for this entrepreneurship, right? And it goes back to, who are you? I'm a person that you can hit me 1,000,000 times. I'm going to come back tomorrow and try again till I get what I want. So that was the very first thing that came to mind.
I love it. That's great. No, that's amazing. Well, I appreciate your honesty, and I love your directness and your style, and the way that you approach working with entrepreneurs and getting that foundation locked, and really getting that base secured in order for them to be successful. And oftentimes I think kind of that's a key piece that's missed. So I appreciate you taking the time. And if people want to connect with you and learn more about you or coaching, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
Probably the best way to reach me is on LinkedIn, and it's Laura Lorenz. You'll find me. Other than that, you can Laura at topfloormentoring.com.
Perfect. Amazing. Well, thank you, Laura. It's great to dig in and learn more about you and what makes you you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.